All right, welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today I am excited to be joined by Roy Heintz. He's a senior executive at a company in Atlanta. He was a basketball coach for a quarter of a century, and he posts leadership content every weekday on LinkedIn. And today we're going to be talking about leading like a coach. So, Roy, I'm going to just kick it over to you with that question. What does it mean to lead like a coach?
Well, Joseph, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. As you said, I was a college basketball coach for a quarter of a century, and you obviously learn an awful lot about leadership as a coach. And many times, I've also been a professional speaker for 35, 40 years now. Companies would ask me to come in and work with their employees on teamwork and different aspects of business. So I had been doing that at the same time as being a college basketball coach. And then 8 years ago, had the opportunity to come and leave basketball coaching to come to work for this company here in Atlanta. And I truly believe that one of the things would help me be successful in the corporate world would be those same leadership principles I learned as a coach. And then as a professional speaker, people began to introduce me by including that story about how I transitioned from coaching into leadership in the corporate world. And the phrase leading like a coach started becoming a repetitive thing that people talked about. It resulted in a book that I released by the same title, Lead Like a Coach, 3 years ago. And now, as you said, I'm posting that kind of leadership principle content on LinkedIn every weekday morning. So the onus for the book was some research that I read from Gallup that was just astounding. They interviewed employees in over 155 countries, and their research showed that 85% of the employees surveyed said that they were disengaged at work. 18% of those people said they were actively disengaged. And I think that in my mind, those actively disengaged people, they quit their jobs already. Now they're still on the payroll, but they've quit at work. And that is really kind of a heartbreaking proposition when I read that research. And I thought there's got to be a better way. Research also tells us that the number one day of the week that people have heart attacks is Sundays, primarily Sunday evenings, because of the stress and dread of going to work the next day. And when you think about the amount of time that people spend at work on a daily basis, I wanted to kind of be an evangelist in the corporate world of saying, let's create a better workplace. And I think it starts with leaders and leadership and how they lead. Matter of fact, that Gallup research concluded in the research, and I'll quote it verbatim, today's workplace does not want transactional bosses. They want transformational leaders that will coach them. And so the book is really built on that research. And the principles are really simple. It's an acronym, LEAD. The L is to look ahead. It starts with vision. Now, a lot of companies, when I go speak with them about this, they'll say, yeah, we get it. Sure, we have to have a vision for where we want to go. You'd be amazed at how many companies don't have that. But the first vision, the first instance of looking ahead really has to start with us as leaders. We've got to determine, what kind of leader do I want to be? When you read that kind of research that says today's people do not want transactional bosses, how do we look at ourselves? Are we bosses? Are we managers that just manage the things people do? Or are we leaders that really inspire and motivate and help our people grow and develop into where they want to go? So we've got to start with, first of all, us. Where do we want to go in our vision, personally and professionally as a leader? Then the second vision is for our organization or company, or the team that we might lead. Maybe we lead a department within a company. Where do we want to see that team go? in the future. Might be a year and then 3 to 5 years, but we've got to know where we want to go. We've got to understand that our direction is determined by our destination. And then the third vision, and this to me is where we really build employee engagement. And that is, we have to invest time as leaders in the lives of our people that we lead. We've got to spend time building relationships with them, because it doesn't matter how much we know. Our people don't care how much we know until they know how much we care about them. And that vision, that third part of vision and looking ahead, is where do they want to go personally and professionally? Where do they want to grow and develop themselves? Because if somebody is really content and they feel like their skills and talents fit this position and they are just content and engaged on a daily basis doing this job, you'll lead them differently than you would somebody who says, I want to be the president of the company someday, or I want to become a CEO. You're going to lead them and coach them and help them grow and develop towards that. So you've got to invest that time in the relationship. And when you invest that time, you're going to build relational trust, and which is really a key to getting good feedback from our people. And you're going to build psychological safety, where they feel safe enough to give that feedback and help the company and customer service really improve to a very high level. So that's the L in lead. The E stands for equip and empower. You know, a lot of times as leaders, we view an employee, somebody that we're leading, and we say, I don't think they're doing a great job. That's not very specific. And they may not even know that if they have not been equipped to understand what it means to work in an excellent way on a daily basis. So even the most basic things of, when do I show up for work? When is it expected that I leave? What are the job responsibilities I have? And, you know, the greatest companies are those that put training and education as the highest priority. And so that is what I mean by equipping our people to perform with excellence. And once we've equipped them and they understand what it looks like to work that way, then we have to empower them to do their work. Again, today's people do not want to be micromanaged. That came out in not only the Gallup research, but I think all of us would prefer not to be micromanaged in our workplace.
Definitely.
You know, and so they want to be empowered. They want to let me do my job. We've got to equip them to do it, then we have to empower them. The A is, not only do we allow them to take action, but we've got to work with them and mutually agree upon some measurables. And I like to use the term, again, as a former coach, that could be a scoreboard, it could be a scorecard, but our people need to know how they're doing on a daily basis. And it allows us as leaders to know how they're doing on a daily basis. And then most importantly, through the other part of the A is measured accountability. Now we can coach them through that measured accountability. We've mutually created these key performance indicators, these KPIs, that really show our people, you're doing a great job. And here's how you know that you're doing a great job. And then it allows us to coach them where maybe they don't feel like they're doing enough, or maybe they're not achieving what they want to achieve, or maybe me as their leader understand that you've been devoting a lot of time to this job responsibility, but you're really not devoting enough here. And so it really helps the leader grow and develop their people and improve their skills. John Maxwell said, doing business without a scoreboard or a scorecard is like bowling without pins. And I think in a lot of workplaces today, in a lot of companies, organizations, we see people that think they're doing a great job, but their leaders have a different opinion, again, because there hasn't been clarity in that equip that empower, and that accountability process that goes on. If you do those three things, and I have really seen the companies that have had me come in and work with them, the companies that have literally bought books, my book for their leaders and had me come in and educate them, those companies are seeing greater engagement and they're seeing a higher level of productivity. And in sports, when franchises or college teams or high school teams win championship level performance year after year after year, we call that a dynasty. And so the D in lead is to develop a dynasty within the workplace. That's the sustained excellence day in and day out, month in and month out, and year after year. And then there's some distinctives about a dynasty, one of which is that it really shifts from leader-led to teammate-led. So you may have a coworker that helps a new employee understand that's not how we do things here. Or when we're looking at culture and the behaviors and actions that are allowed on a daily basis, that's my definition of cultures, are the behaviors and actions within a company or organization on a daily basis. That's where a dynasty in the workplace, co-workers, teammates can help each other be much better and more aligned with the culture of the organization. So some of those things, I'm always amazed as I talk to executives, talk to companies, that some of them, not a lot, thankfully, will say, okay, yeah, we've got that going on. And then I say, oh, really? And then begin to press in a little bit with questions and help them understand that's really not going on in your workplace. I also have other people that will say that just seems so time consuming. But what I've learned is, yes, there's some time investment on the front end as leaders, but the payoff is incredible, because eventually by allowing your people, by empowering them to do the work, you'll find that you're allowed to have much more time to lead and coach your people, because you're not worried about micromanaging them and the details of the job, because you've trained them to do the work.
Yeah, you covered a ton of ground there. Super, super good. There's a couple spots where I wanted to stop you, but I was like, man, you're on a roll, and it's really, no, it's really good stuff. Really powerful, and we worked on some questions ahead of time, but we'll probably kind of switch gears a little bit here from what we planned, because you in the first, in the L, talking about vision and getting into into that side of things, you said the word relationships a ton. And so I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, because in the more corporate world, relationships are often not valued very highly. And, especially in media portrayals of the corporate world, I think relationships are valued more highly than even what people might perceive, especially for the people who are extremely successful and they're, at the top of their game. Most of them have developed really strong relationships, but the attitude is, oh, you got to be out for yourself. You've got to be focusing on how to get the most that you can for the least effort possible, or negotiation. People typically think of that word as being trying to get as much as you can from the other person, which are all very non-relational things. And then I've worked for quite a few different companies, and until my last role, I'd never had a boss that was thinking about me and outside of my position in their organization. And, they weren't asking me the questions of, where do you see yourself going? How can I equip you to get there? And both my bosses at my previous job were very concerned about that, and they recognize that, hey, most people that come to work for our company aren't going to be here forever. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be investing in them. We should be investing in these relationships and, really focusing on equipping the folks that we have on our team while they're here. Because if we don't, for one, they're going to leave anyway, and then they're not going to be our friends anymore, and we'll never talk to them again most of the time. Or, on the flip side, while they're here, they're not going to be investing in the same way. They're not going to be leveling up. They're not going to be growing and bringing as much to the organization as they could. And there's a really good chance they're actually probably going to leave sooner than they would have anyway, because they haven't built that relational equity, and they'll be looking for an opportunity to kind of dive in. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about why, kind of where that balance comes in. You alluded to it at the end there, but the balance between taking a more transactional approach to the way you treat your employees, hey, they're just a number here. They're expendable. I can go out and find more people to work. There's plenty of people that want to work, versus I'm going to invest in people even though I know that they might leave. Like, how do you break out of that transactional mindset as a leader?
Well, it's hugely important. And I think that coming out of COVID, the great resignation was really, in a sense, a great awakening. And if it wasn't for leaders, it should have been. Because the reason so many people resigned and left their companies really was the understanding of those people of the gross dissatisfaction that they had in their workplace. For decades, and I'm now living in my 6th decade, was a college basketball coach. When I wasn't coaching, I was also doing television work for over a decade as a play-by-play and color analyst. So I've been around sports my whole life. And what we saw in sports is a transition from, I don't really care to have a relationship with you. I don't want to be your friend. I'm just going to be a hard-nosed coach. And in the workplace, we call that a transactional boss. But we began to see more successful coaches are people that had relationships. And maybe sometimes the perception is not from the outside, but when you hear from the inside the locker room, and you know that there's been an intentional effort to build those relationships, that's where success follows. I think that if we're going to, I forget who said it, it's a famous story, but a CEO, the chief financial officer came to a CEO and said, hey, we're spending a lot of money on training and education. What happens if they leave us, if we've spent all this money and they leave us? And he said, what happens if we don't do that and they stay? And so you definitely want to invest in your people with resources and the growth and development, but you want to get a return on that investment, and that return comes with engagement, which is led into by that relationship building. It's not touchy-feely. And if somebody is more of a transactional boss and they think this is just touchy-feely, hearts and, nonsense, I would tell you that you really need to rethink that, because and a lot of people will point to, oh, that's just today's millennials, the young people. It's not. Right. Everybody likes that. When we're walking down a street and somebody says to us, hey, that's a great shirt, or I saw you, that was so kind what you just did. They caught us in an act of kindness. Don't we all just stand up a little bit straighter? Our shoulders go back. We feel much better. Why should that be any different in the workplace? And why should it be any different in the workplace where our people are spending a large amount of time on a weekly basis? And so I cannot tell you, I think this is a key to productivity increase by increasing engagement, is that investment from leaders into the relationships they have with their people. Know the names of their family, their wives, their spouses, their children. Know what they're interested in. Be able to engage. If they are interested in something that you don't know about, my gosh, can you imagine what would happen, Joseph, if I said to you, wow, I didn't know that about you. I don't know anything, but hey, let's grab lunch, or tell me about that. Tell me more about that. You would automatically feel more engaged in our relationship if I just made that tiny investment.
Yeah, and I kind of want to take this even a slightly different angle, because it doesn't only apply to well, actually, before I go there, I want to just validate what you're saying, because with the coaching and people being coaches building those friendly relationships with with the people that they're coaching. So we have a friend who is a coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, and his players love him. Like he's just on he's an assistant coach, and or maybe that's not the right term, but anyway, he's not like the head coach or something, but he's on the coaching staff, and the guys on his team, he's built a relationship with them, and he knows about their lives and what's going on. He'll invite them to come and be part of what's going on. He'll invite them to his house, and he's built a really strong relationship with them, and they perform better because of it, and they listen to him. And these guys, he's coaching guys that are making millions and millions of dollars a year, and they will slow down and really take him seriously. Whereas most of the other players in those positions are really arrogant. They don't typically have humility. But I've now met a couple of the players, and all the guys that are on that he's coaching have a very high level of humility. And, he's really led with that example by building those relationships. And then they want to be with him. They want to be like him. They want his advice versus him, pushing that advice on them. They're kind of pulling it out because he's built that relationship. So super powerful. But I kind of want to transition into the world that I'm in, which is more on the marketing and sales side, because the same conversation is going on where, the focus over the last 10, 15 years is like, how do we create scalable growth? How do we, automate as much as we can? How do we create these systems so that we can kind of remove the human element as much as possible and just get down to getting leads as cheap as possible, maximizing what we're getting out of that? And, that does apply to really low dollar things. So like or consumer market, it can apply to a degree. But if you're selling something that's thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, relationships make those deals go way faster. And it's amazing how, if you're on a sales call with somebody and you ask them about what they do outside of work, your chances of getting a deal go up dramatically. And not if you're doing it in a way where you're using it as a sales tool, but when you're using it as a way to just genuinely care about the other person. You see a picture of their family on the wall, or, I've seen people who have like a painting that was clearly done by one of their kids, or, by a kid on the wall. And you just ask them about something like that. And then all of a sudden you start talking about, their kids' artwork, or, I do some gardening stuff around our property, and we homeschool our kids. And usually there's some kind of a connection there first. And then by the end of the call, the other person is trying to figure out a way to work together because we built a relationship and built rapport. So I think the same principle of building that relationship, really investing in people, applies to sales and to the marketing world in a similar way. And I think we're kind of seeing a shift towards that in the market.
No doubt. What do we used to say in the sales industry? We'd say, oh, he's such a good salesman, he could sell ice to Eskimos. We like to use that example here and say, but why? Eskimos don't need ice. And what we've understood, and one of the best books I've read, and I think I'm a pretty voracious reader, and Harvey Mackay's book, Swim with the Sharks Without Getting Eaten Alive. Harvey Mackay built a now $1 billion envelope industry out of Minnesota. His company has become a $1 billion business in the envelope industry. And in that book, he has like a checklist of like 80 personal relational things that you should know about your customer. And that book's probably 20, 30 years old. And when you have relationships, as you said, in the sales profession, your sales are going to be much higher because you're understanding people's needs. And that's part of our mission statement is we provide cost-effective solutions to our customers' needs. And that comes from deep-seated relationships where we've invested a lot of time. And even if you haven't invested, to your example, to say, like I look over your shoulder and say, oh, that's a great picture of you and your family, or that's a great drawing that your child did. Oh my gosh, how old are they? And you start engaging, now that breaks down some resistance, and it doesn't feel false. It doesn't feel a created thing. It's really genuine, and you're gonna make more sales. I mean, it's just that simple.
Yeah, and so just taking that, moving away from the transactional approach and focusing on building high quality relationships. If you want to succeed in business as a leader, in sales, as a, even as a subject matter expert, even if you're out in the field and you're doing the actual work, whatever that is, if you build relationships with other people that are doing the same thing, and you're building pure relationships, you're going to learn a lot faster. You're going to move faster. You're going to get new job opportunities. You're going to get so much more when you give first. And are you familiar with the book, The Go-Giver by Bob Burg?
Absolutely. Great book.
Yeah. So I've recently gotten to interface with Bob and get to know him a little bit. And I was at an event of theirs recently. And I think that something that's really shifted for me over the last year as I've been, or even the last like 4 or 5 months, is I've been very relationship focused for a long time. I've, focused marketing things on how do we build relationships? How do we connect with the conversations with the right people? But something that's really shifted is how important your mindset is going into the conversation. So you're going to do what we just talked about, and you're going to ask somebody about their kids. You have to detach from the outcome of the conversation. So instead of going into that conversation going, how can I close a deal? How can I get business from this person? What can I get from this person? Instead, you're going, what can I give? How can I serve this person? How can I improve their day? How can I make them look good? Either if it's an interview like this, or if it's making them look good to their boss by making the right connection for them, or figuring out a service that they didn't realize they needed and making a connection there, or whatever the case would be. When you approach it like that, then when you're asking a question like, about the drawing on the wall, they can feel your intention. And it's amazing how perceptive people are at reading our intentions when we're going into a conversation. So when you ask that same question and you genuinely care and you want to take that time to know that person, then you're going to have massive opportunities that will come from that you wouldn't get any other way. But if you say the exact same words, but your intention is to try to manipulate the person or get something from them, they're going to know that, and it doesn't work. So it's like switching that part in your brain to go, I'm going to go into this conversation. It's with the right kind of person, but I'm going to focus on how do I add value to them? How do I care about them? And if anything comes from it, great. If not, no worries. Like that mindset shift has made a huge difference in how much opportunity actually comes from building relationships and doing that side of things.
And probably one of the most legendary motivational speakers in the area of sales was Zig Ziglar. And he said that if you focus on helping people get what they want, you'll be able to get as much as you ever want down the road because of it. And his whole focus was on that relational meeting of needs for our customers. And he was just great at coaching and equipping people to do that.
Awesome. Well, I said 20, 25 minutes, and every single time I say that, we go over, but it's a great conversation. We
can come back at some point.
Yeah, we'll have to do another one, because we only covered really, I know you kind of went through them, but we really only went into the lead, and we didn't even cover all the portions of it, which is, really digging into that. So there's definitely a lot more we could talk about in the future. And Roy, I really appreciate, not only you jumping on this call, but, also we've gotten to interact a little bit, and you're just an awesome guy. So really appreciate you taking the time to come on, and I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure. And even though we really focused on that L, don't forget that I think that's the most important part of it.
Awesome. Well, with that, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.